Forky.
Someone needs a brown marker.
So, Toy Story 5 is finally here, the fifth main installment in Pixar's biggest franchise, and easily one of the most debated sequels Disney has ever announced. For years, I've been skeptical on this movie. Toy Story is my second favorite animated franchise of all time, and after what felt like Disney constantly milking this series to its limit, my expectations were all over the place. Toy Story 4 was solid, but unnecessary, Lightyear was forgettable, and I kept asking myself the same question. Does Toy Story 5 actually need to exist? The trailers looked promising enough, but I wasn't interested in nostalgia. I wanted to know if Pixar could find a meaningful reason to continue a story that already felt complete. Well, thankfully, Toy Story 5 answers that question almost immediately. Not only does it justify its existence, it earns it. This is a genuinely heartfelt, mature Pixar sequel that understands exactly why people love these characters. It isn't perfect, but what makes it work is that it finally pushes the franchise into new emotional territory. Instead of repeating the same lessons, the film forces the characters to confront change head on. And because of that, it hits harder than I expected. The first thing that stands out is the animation. Pixar has always been at the forefront of animation, but Toy Story 5 might be their most visually impressive film in the series. The older movies still hold up remarkably well, but some of the human designs definitely show their age. Here, everything feels elevated. The playtime sequences with Bonnie and Blaze are stunning. The colors pop, the textures feel tangible, and the lighting gives a certain quality that belongs in an art museum. It has a kinetic energy that occasionally reminds me of Spider-Verse, while still feeling like Toy Story. For a movie with a reported $250 million budget, every frame looks like it belongs on a poster. One of my biggest concerns going in was the Jessie storyline. Not because Jessie doesn't deserve the spotlight, she absolutely does, but because I was worried Pixar would be recycling the same old ideas. Instead, they deliver one of the strongest emotional arcs in the entire movie. Watching Jessie return to her old home, witness how technology has transformed the world around her, and discovering that Emily named her daughter after her creates some of the most powerful moments in the film. It's sincere, emotional, and ultimately becomes the heart of Toy Story 5. That naturally leads into the film's biggest theme, technology. This could have easily turned into a lazy, toys good, screens bad message. But Pixar takes a smarter approach here. The movie acknowledges both positives and negatives of toys and technology without demonizing either side. Lily Pad isn't really a villain. She's a machine driven by an algorithm that genuinely believes she knows what's best for Bonnie. On the other side, Jessie becomes so consumed by the fear of technology replacing toys that she begins seeing every piece of tech as the enemy. Through characters like Smarty Pants voiced by Conan O'Brien, the movie gradually reveals that technology itself isn't the problem. The real issue is forgetting what children actually need. The result is a nuanced message that strengthens every major plotline. This is where Jessie's character arc truly shines. She realizes that what Bonnie needs most isn't a toy or a device, it's a friend. That friend ends up being Blaze. Both children enjoy technology, but they also have a genuine love for imagination and creative play. Meanwhile, Lilypad unintentionally pushes Bonnie towards people who don't understand her and even mock her for still playing with toys. The film carefully develops Bonnie and Blaze's friendship, making every interaction feel earned. By the time they finally connect, it becomes much more than a happy ending. It's proof that meaningful human relationships still matter in an increasingly digital world. That lands because the movie spends so much time building towards it. Speaking of Bonnie, she's become one of the most divisive characters in the Toy Story franchise for some reason. In Toy Story 3, she was instantly lovable, while Toy Story 4 left some people frustrated with how she was portrayed. I understand both perspectives, but if there is one thing this movie accomplishes is restoring Bonnie's character. Toy Story 5 presents her as a shy, vulnerable kid desperately searching for connection. She isn't obsessed with technology, she's simply struggling to find out where she belongs. Andy may represent childhood at its most idealistic, but Bonnie represents something equally relatable: insecurity, and that's exactly why she works here. Buzz Lightyear also receives a surprisingly effective subplot. His goal throughout much of the narrative is finding the courage to propose to Jessie, and it's pretty charming. We're used to seeing Buzz as this fearless protector for the toys, so watching him deal with vulnerability is a refreshing change of pace. It's a very human fear hidden beneath the plastic action figure. While sure a few scenes drag longer than necessary, the emotional core of the storyline works because it's rooted in something universally relatable. A lot of that credit belongs to Andrew Stanton. For those of you that don't know, he directed WALL-E. aka cinema. Not to mention, this is the guy who has been involved with Toy Story since the beginning. He understands these characters better than almost anyone. That experience shows throughout the movie. The dialogue feels natural, the comedy lands consistently, and the chemistry between Woody and Buzz captures the spirit of the original movies while still allowing them to evolve. Randy Newman's score also continues to do what it does best: elevate the emotional moments without overwhelming them. It doesn't reinvent the musical identity of the franchise. The most of what is new comes from the 50 Buzz Lightyears, but it absolutely delivers when it matters. Another surprise is how the franchise is seeming to allow itself to evolve with its audience. The shift to the PG rating is immediate. The humor feels noticeably more mature in places, and several jokes clearly targeted to people who have grew up with this franchise. Smarty Pants' introduction alone feels like a joke written for adults rather than children. Yet the movie never loses the warmth that defines Toy Story. In a strange way, it reminds me of Inside Out 2. It maintains the energy and charm of its predecessors while tackling more grounded, relatable emotions. More than anything, what makes Toy Story successful is its central message. This isn't a movie about technology replacing toys, it's about balance. Toys and technology can coexist. Both can help children and grow up in different ways. That theme enriches the arcs of Jessie, Bonnie, and Lilypad while giving the film a far more emotional depth than I expected. More importantly, it argues that real friendship can't be replaced by algorithms. They come from genuine human connection. That's the idea that gives the movie its heart. But there are still things that I'm not a big fan of. The biggest issue for me is Woody. For a character who has been the emotional center of this franchise since its inception, his role feels small. He spends most of the time reacting to events rather than driving them, and that's a strange position for such an iconic character. If you removed Woody from large portions of the story, nothing changes. Tom Hanks still delivers a great performance, but the script never gives Woody a meaningful arc of his own. There are also a few story details, like how he's somehow able to connect with Woody through the radio, that feel underexplained and exist mainly because the plot needs them to. In fairness, that is a really big nitpick, but I digress. And it's not just Woody who gets sidelined. Most of the supporting toys almost have nothing to do throughout the narrative. I'm not exaggerating here. For a huge chunk of the runtime, they're literally sitting in a box in the garage or just waiting in Bonnie's room waiting for the story to come back to them. It's a weird creative decision, especially when the franchise has spent decades building up such a strong bond with these characters. Then, when Woody, Buzz, and Lilypad finally return, the first thing they tell the other toys to do is to stay put and do nothing. Really? It's unintentionally hilarious, but it also highlights a recurring problem with recent Toy Story movies. There's simply too many toys to go around and not enough meaningful roles for all of them. Then there are the army of Buzz Lightyears. It's clear Disney wanted to revisit an older concept that has been floating around during the previous Toy Story movies. There are heartfelt and funny moments throughout. The problem is that as the film progresses, it starts to wear thin. We've gotten so many versions of Buzz struggling with identity, purpose, and self-awareness across the franchise, so watching yet another Space Ranger, and this time multiple Space Rangers, go through a similar journey doesn't feel as fresh as it once does. The first few scenes are entertaining, but eventually the storyline begins repeating itself as it overstays its welcome. And finally, we have the Taylor Swift song. And this is gonna be probably the most controversial part of this entire review. I did not like this song. It's not bad by any means. It's fine. The problem is that it never feels essential to the movie. Pixar's best musical moments elevate the story and become inseparable from the emotions on screen. This track never reaches those heights. While I appreciate the return to her country roots, the song feels safe, familiar, and ultimately forgettable. What makes the decision even stranger is that it effectively replaces You've Got a Friend in Me as the emotional centerpiece. I wish I was making that up. That is a nearly impossible standard to live up to, and this song doesn't even come close. You are telling me that we replace what is basically the definition of this world for a generic song that Swifties will call Oscar-worthy? Are we serious? But that's it. Aside from that, I walked away from Toy Story 5 far more impressed than I expected. Going into this movie, I genuinely questioned whether Pixar had anything left to say with these characters. After all, Toy Story 3 already felt like a perfect ending, and Toy Story 4 struggled to justify reopening that book, yet somehow, against all odds, Toy Story 5 finds a reason to exist. It doesn't rely entirely on nostalgia, and it doesn't simply repeat lessons we've already learned. Instead, it uses these characters to explore change, friendship, technology, and growing up in a way that feels surprisingly relevant. What impressed me the most is that the movie understands what Toy Story has always been about. Beneath the animation, the comedy, and the talking toys, these films have never really been about toys. They've been about people. They're about connection. They're about finding your place in the world and holding on to the relationships that matter most. Toy Story 5 never loses sight of that. That's why the emotional moments land. That's why Jessie's story works so well, and that's why the ending hits the way it does. Is this the best Toy Story movie? No. Is it perfect? Not even close. But it is something I didn't expect. A sequel that earns its place in the franchise. A movie that takes risks, tells a meaningful story, and gives these characters a reason to come back one more time. I still don't think we need a 6th or 7th film, but if this film teaches us anything is to trust the process. Because for all its flaws, Toy Story 5 proves that Pixar still understands what makes this story special. This and this year's Hoppers prove that when these Pixar films are handled with respect and care, they are still as relevant as ever. And honestly, that's the biggest surprise of all. So I'm gonna give this film an 8.5 out of 10.